Hello, everybody. Welcome back to ClapperCast. I'm your host, as always, Carson Tamar, joined by a very special guest today, Ewan Gleadow. We got him on the schedule despite his busy schedule. Ewan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, apart from... I'll apologise in advance if I just kind of switch over to these sunglasses, but I can't see anything out my left eye, because I like to go through the wars before I make podcast appearances, so I've had a few months rest, and now I'm ready to put my life, body and soul on the line, as ever. But other than that, doing good. I moved to my dream city, and all I do these days is make spaghetti bolognese, so...
All right. I really would love to know ClapperCast's audience opinion of you, because I think it should be very good, but let's be fair. I think our appearances, we go from you going on a hike to see some sort of animal to you losing your hearing to now losing your eyesight. So it's just, I imagine it's a unique image, I guess I should say.
Like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump kind of image, and then at the end of it, I'm kind of looking a bit better. But,
right.
I haven't been on ClapperCast in about 2 or 3 years. Like, the last one I did was for the trial of the Chicago 7. Which
that is a while ago, actually.
Yeah, that's a while ago. I watched that when I had no hearing, actually. So, it made it better.
Probably a better way to watch that, actually.
Oh, yeah. Sacha Baron Cohen's more enjoyable when you're deaf. But...
absolutely. So just very quickly, can you tell everyone where you write for? Because I want to explain kind of why I specifically invited you on here.
Yeah.
Where can we find your words?
Oh, I mean, cult following's the big one, isn't it? The old music journalism. I also do bits and pieces for sort of like Daily Star, Daily Mirror. I haven't written for Clapper in ages. I'm very sorry. Yeah, I think cult following's the main one, isn't it? Where I do all like my music stuff.
Yeah.
And I am. Yeah.
The point is, number one, real journalist. Number two, real music journalist. And today we're talking about kind of, I mean, I could not think of anyone better to have on in a more professional sense to review Miss Americana, Taylor Swift's 2020 documentary, following, on paper, I'm going to say it's saying it's following the recording of her album Miss Americana, or Lover, excuse me. I don't know if it in practice if it really is that, but let's go ahead, let's take a look at the film, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about Miss Americana.
Just gonna go have fun. No one out there that I know of in the audience actively hates me. Not get dead face.
Ready to do this?
Ready, totally ready. Throughout my whole career, label executives would just say, a nice girl doesn't force their opinions on people. A nice girl smiles and waves and says thank you. I became the person everyone wanted me to be.
I think that Taylor Swift, she is annoying.
All of her model friends.
Too good. Going through guys like a train.
She's too skinny.
Nobody physically saw me for a year. And that was what I thought they wanted. I had to deconstruct an entire belief system.
Toss it out and reject it.
Okay, Ewan, I'm going to turn it over to you again, because first I just want to ask, I want to get a base level for both of us. Would you consider yourself a Swiftie?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I am in lockdown. I listened to almost all of her records. The only ones I've not listened to are the debut and Speak Now. But I was saving Speak Now for when Taylor's version came out, and I've not got around to it yet.
Sure.
I love Taylor Swift's music. I think she's an incredible lyricist and, more importantly, an incredible performer. It's always a pleasure to talk about Taylor Swift. And I think Midnights was one of the albums I was looking forward to most last year. Now, granted, it wasn't the best Swift album. I feel like the Antonoff production's getting a little tiresome. But
sure.
It was a new Taylor Swift album, and I was quite excited for it. So when you told me, we're doing Miss Americana, I was like, I remember watching that back before I listened to any of her music, and I fucking hated it because I didn't know what Taylor Swift was. So now I'm like brushed up, and I've rewatched it, and it's all clicking together in what's left in my brain.
If anyone needs to see development, I would highly recommend you go over to Letterboxd and check out Ewan Gleadow original review from Miss Americana, where I think he specifically calls out, he's like, I'm not a Swiftie, I don't like Taylor Swift, all I've listened to her is her Red album, which is shit.
No, that's the thing. I was clearly eating glue at the time of that review, because the Red album's probably one of her best. I don't want to bring up the topic already, but what is the best Taylor Swift album?
Right.
It's Folklore, but all folklore or lover, which I'm glad this documentary's about. Look, it's kind of, but not really. Like you mentioned, it's more an amalgamation of a lot of very personal and deep things that a lot of documentaries are now taking for granted. But this feels like it actually has an earnestness to it, which is trying to connect with someone that it's impossible for people to connect with Taylor Swift because she's not a person anymore. She's like a brand.
Right.
It's like Harry Styles or Louis Capaldi or it's like
She's
that
an
level.
idea. She's turned into Barbie from Barbie.
She has. She
And
honestly
we're
has. And it's terrifying as well because you look at people like, the members of One Direction, for instance, Niall Horan, like the fandom culture that surrounds artists like this really does put me off listening to some of them. And it did put me off Taylor Swift for some time. But, you just got to cut through those channels and appreciate that she is a really, really talented singer and artist, regardless of the foaming at the mouth fans who don't want me to say that, Evermore could be a bit better.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I definitely am a Swiftie. It took me a long time to get into her. Up until I remember Reputation was the first album I was around for, and I was like, oh, it's good. I was somewhat critical of it, and then I remember hardcore hating on her going into Lover, and I was like, oh, it's I hate Taylor Swift, just not my girly. Then I listened to Lover, and I was like, fuck, guys, I actually like this. And now full blown, we're doing this podcast to celebrate the end of the US leg of the Eras tour, which also means I'm going to Taylor Swift, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
But all that being said, I was excited to revisit Miss Americana because, again, I also didn't really know Taylor Swift at the time. I thought it was a fine documentary, but I love 5'2". I love these documentaries capturing these artists that I really enjoy. So I was really excited to revisit Miss Americana. And I guess I can start quickly because I'm not going to lie, I was kind of disappointed. Not to say the documentary shit. And I think it has a lot of good elements. What really struck me was just how relentlessly messy this film was. If I try to boil down what is Miss Americana, what is the narrative here, what's our structure, what are we building towards, it doesn't feel like the film has an answer until it then radically changes in the last quarter and becomes a message about politics and about speaking up about politics and standing for what you believe in. And there are moments throughout this runtime, and we'll get to them, where I think it is really worthwhile. I think it's really raw. I think it's really important. I think it's really fun at times, especially if you are a Swift fan. I mean, kind of living in an iconic moment is that when they're recording Getaway Car, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people quote that and just love that moment. But as a film, I struggle to see how this all comes together. It's one of those films that feels like it was impacted by COVID, and you see the 2020 release and you're like, oh, it's probably just due to COVID, and then you realize it came out in January, so not really. It's a weird watch. What were your initial thoughts on Miss Americana, Ewan?
Kind of what you said there, but I think it's there's a lot of spin and plates going on and a lot of sort of deeply personal stuff that is difficult to include in a documentary, especially about someone that is a megastar. But I appreciate at the same time that they have included it, even if there isn't, the time to actually dig into the details. Someone with that schedule, someone with that much going on, it must be difficult to even sort of breach any of those subjects, let alone, excuse me, the southern air is killing me off. But there is a lot to contain in what is essentially, it's not too long of a documentary by today's standards. Like you look at documentaries and think, I'm going to have to sit for 2.5 hours and watch this. Miss Americana is really cut and shut, and I do think that's part of it because it's a Netflix film. It's made for the streaming service. It's made for the Swiftie fans who want a glimpse behind the curtain. Now, with that comes the sort of... I'm glad you mentioned 5'2", because that is an extraordinary documentary on Lady Gaga and probably is one of the best music documentaries we've had in the past, I'd say, decade. Because you look at things like the Lewis Capaldi documentary that released recently, it is more fan service than documentary. It is more, here's a glimpse behind the camera, here's what the artist wants you to see. You never really get that feeling with Miss Americana, but the offset of that is it does feel really quite messy and just a bit all over the place. I understand it's trying to follow the timeline along as best it can, but there are ways of fixing that and making it a bit clearer. I mean, she did the Long Pond studio sessions, which obviously isn't the same sort of documentary, but does have a lot of meaning behind the folklore songs. She did that really well. Really enjoyed that. It reminded me of the Bruce Springsteen's Letters to You, where he did the same thing, black and white in a studio, explain the reasons of the songs, perform a few, perfect. Obviously, Miss Americana would lose a lot if it did that. On the offset, though, it is, if it's meant to be sort of showing us what the build-up and fallout of Lover was, then it really didn't do that good of a job. It's a bit all over the place in the wrong ways, but there's enough detail and information there to make it at least interesting to watch, which is at the baseline, the foundation level. If you're going into a documentary about a subject or an artist you're interested in, the first step is learning something new that you didn't know about the artist. And absolutely, Miss Americana does that, get that lovely check off straight away. It's just where it falls apart later on, when it's starting to build and build and build, and you're thinking, well, that's a lot of tragedy and trauma and horrible issues that really you can sympathise with, absolutely, but there is no way of tying them together, which is,
right,
is what it is. But
yeah, I mean, I also will add that, like, I think it also just, like, there is a element of boldness here, and an element of, like, I would not expect, celebrity culture is a lot of, like, protecting one's image. It's a lot of, playing it safe. And there's a lot here that, like, I am genuinely shocked that there's a scene where, like, she's having an open conversation with her family about going into politics, and she would include her dad being like, don't do it. Like, that feels like a bold choice that you wouldn't normally include. Things about her body image I thought were very honest and very raw. Like, I'll give you that. I think this screams in those moments of vulnerability, in its best moments. Like, this is honest, that this is real, and that it's a very important thing. Like, Taylor Swift truly cares about being honest, which I think is good to watch. It really is in those moments of narrative. I mean, just the opening, it goes from the Reputation stadium tour to Grammy nominations, which never come back, really. We don't really ever get any payoff for that, so I don't know why it was there, to recording Lover, to then recording Reputation. Then it goes through her career. You get all this stuff from her past, and then she's talking about how she loved her past, and then she's talking about how she hates her past. It's a very weird narrative. And I also think, like, if you are a Swiftie, how this film treats Reputation is very strange, considering Reputation's kind of thesis is like, I'm done with the narrative, I'm done playing the games, I'm here to be honest, be myself, and call people out. And this film comes at a point after Reputation where she's like, oh, I want to be honest now, and I want to be myself now. And it's like, well, then what was Reputation? And also there's this whole thing about, like, oh, I'm so done trying to get the validation of others, I'm so done trying to get the validation of, like, people, just strangers. Yet then you also frame the entire start of this film with the pressure from not getting the Grammy nominations, and that seems like an inspiration for Lover. And it was just like, again, it was very odd in the beginning, and I bet you they just didn't, like, what this screams is that they didn't have a plan going in. They wanted to set up potential for narrative through lines, and just none of them panned out. I feel like probably in the edit, then you cut some of that out and you make it a little bit cleaner. But again, as you mentioned, it's rather quick. It's only like an hour, 20 minutes. So I don't know how much they really even had to use. But it definitely was, I mean, again, it's just messy.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, obviously part of that is not the failure of Lana Wilson. I think Lana Wilson as the director here does a solid job, as good as any director could do with a documentary that finds essentially a megastar in a transitional period, not really sure of what's coming next, where to go after Reputation. Because Reputation, I don't think people remember how controversial it was before it had even released, with the calligraphy and then the subject matter. And it's a really deep album, and honest to God, it is one of my favourites of hers. I really do enjoy Reputation. However, the crucial part that this documentary is missing is the core of which everything else is circling around. What is the real focus? And there isn't one, which I get. It does well to sort of look into the sort of the internet culture, like you said, that sort of celebrity wow factor, which, as a side, is absolutely terrifying. And I appreciate that the documentary looks into it. I made the mistake of criticising Niall Horan's new album, and people asked if I hated the Irish, and I'm like, yeah. But, we've all had our strokes with fame. But for Taylor Swift, it's essentially, I always think of Taylor Swift in sort of moments that are outside of her career. You always think of the Kanye West stage performance, and those bits are always going to be attached to her regardless of whether or not she likes it or not. So really, Miss Americana is missing this huge opportunity to look into a transitional period where, if anything, the albums that follow on from Lover were just a stripped back, a bare essential album of just really reconnecting with the roots that inspired her to do her own music. Now you can argue reputations that, like you said, it's the sort of the clean slate, wipe it from memory. But then to do a documentary that is going against that grain that she's just said is very confusing, and it feels a bit, misplaced and confused. And certainly the amount that's going on in the documentary doesn't help. There's a lot going on, and if you're saying, "Oh, let's wipe the slate clean, let's begin again," and then the very second you say that, it's, "Oh, well, let's have a look back at all the other stuff you've done in your career." You need the balance, and it's not quite there. But I do think it does a very good job of humanizing someone that's very hard to relate to because of how big of a platform they've got. Taylor Swift, I do think, when you see her obvious PR team announcements and stuff like that, it feels heartfelt, it feels genuine. Which, I mean, you can spot things like that from a mile off. Nick Cave with his diary entries I get emails from him every other week saying, "Oh, this is my new red hand injury," and it feels genuine. It feels like an actual connection with an artist who is otherwise difficult to connect with. So I've got a lot of appreciation for Harry Styles with the As It Was tour, where they are huge arena shows, but he's made them feel very homely. Now, I've not seen Taylor Swift live because I'm not paying £100 for a ticket to see Taylor Swift in a city that's 3 hours away from me. However, there is something to be said for how she connects with her audience, and I think Miss Americana is kind of a positive symptom of that. It's something that does give people what they want. At the same time, it feels very genuine. There's no sort of brushstrokes to say this isn't really happening or anything like that. It is straight down the middle. This is Taylor Swift. And it does well. It's just very shaky. But
at the same time, I think this is a movie that is also very clear in trying to say, fans, please just act normal. I mean, yes, it goes into stalking and such that are very serious, but also core memory is that proposal scene, and just an example of just how horribly awkward fan interactions can be. I cannot imagine being a celebrity and going through that, and it's just the worst possible outcome of just awkwardness for Taylor. And I appreciate that that made the cut, because I feel a lot of times that wouldn't make the cut, and it's just don't do that.
I'd love to not psychoanalyze a massive Taylor Swift fan, but really understand. I mean, I can't talk. My favorite band's pulled up a song 3 times this year, but I wasn't crying or screaming "Oh my god, Jarvis Cocker's on a stage in front of me." It's there has to be a degree of respect that some people lack for the artists that they say they love. You see it all the time, though. You see this, Matt Healy from the 1975. That's such a huge example now, because the man feeds off of controversy, but he does it intentionally, and I think it's really just a fascinating experiment that he's doing. He's doing what Alex Turner from Arctic Monkeys wishes he could do, but with worse music.
You just had to bring Matt Healy up on this podcast, didn't you?
You know what? I've grown. He's grown on me a little bit, just a smidge. But the whole, I mean, Taylor Swift, for instance, you look at the fans, and like you said, that the certain clips in this movie is questionable. But every now and then you will get I got TikTok recently. The TikToks on I've got it on my phone. I've got TikTok. So you go on TikTok and you get all these reels, and every now and then you'll get one, and it's a fucking nutcase of a fan going, "Oh, I've tattooed Taylor Swift's album discography onto my forehead. Will you sign this, please?" And it's no, absolutely not. That's not normal behavior. It's not normal behavior. And I always wonder what the sort of thinking behind that is. What's I get the barrier conversation, getting front row for these gigs. I get it, but they're not gonna acknowledge you in the same way that you acknowledge them, and it's that mental separation that Miss Americana does really hard and tries to hammer it home, saying, "Stop fucking being weird, please." People aren't gonna stop being weird, but
it's serious. I mean, there's people who go to Eras Tour. It's not a medical condition that some people go to Eras Tour and get so excited that they lose memory of the concert. It's as powerful. It's in the opposite direction of PTSD, where you repress the memories. It's so powerful on the other side that people genuinely I don't remember going to the concert. It's on Wikipedia. So
that's
some
insane.
people don't
I mean,
really.
I have that same issue, but usually it's because I'm drunk. But
right.
Like,
well, that was my first thought. I thought, like, okay.
Yeah. I've been to plenty of gigs that I don't remember, but I remember the aftershock. I ended up in a bar at 3 a.m. drinking martinis, and security came up to me and said, it's closed now. You've got to leave. It's like, oh, I see. Excellent.
Hey, it
I
happens.
ate 30 mozzarella balls from McDonald's that night. I had the time of my life.
But I love that you guys have mozzarella balls. That's my biggest takeaway from this story.
Oh, they were fantastic.
We don't have that here.
I thought so. I was talking to my mate about this. We had a good half-hour chat about what Americans do and don't have at McDonald's, and I didn't realise you don't get the mozzarella ones. You're missing out. UK tour for those, honestly. But
well, me and my friend have, not to bring up Matt Healy, me and my friend have a long-running joke that we want to see the 1975 live in the O2. So maybe when we do that.
I got offered an interview with Matt Healy about a year and a half ago. And I said
biggest mistake of your life not to take it.
Because I wanted to go to the pub. I do.
This is giving when I at Comic-Con was invited to a private brunch by Ezra Miller, and like I really could have.
You really could have said, "Don't do Flash."
I really could have.
You could have. You were the man that could have stopped those baby microwave clips on Twitter. You know how many times I've had to see that on my timeline? It's the amount of times I've seen, like, it's when, I don't mean to knock people that have real love and interest in things, because I'm a husk and I don't have interest in anything anymore. But when you see the TikToks of people recording themselves at the gig, and she's not even on the stage yet, but they're sobbing, they're fucking weeping, and they're like in a state of like complete euphoria. And it's like, if I could have a crumb of that happiness, I would not be using it here. I would be doing something else with it. I wouldn't be crying, because I've seen, to be fair, that set list is extraordinary. I think it's really good. However, I've seen some of my favourite artists live. I've had the pleasure of interviewing them. I've not cried. But I think that's just a British thing, isn't it? It's, stiff upper lip type.
It might be.
I've got my jaw.
We're a little more emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll say, with going back to the documentary, one last thing really is, like, I do think that this is a documentary that its message has aged incredibly well, considering this really ends on this cliffhanger of like, what's to come of this career. I've been open, I've been political, am I going to lose it all? And she even kind of predicts, she's like, well, I think this is like my moment right now. And it's like, girl, you just wait for what's coming. I think that is an incredibly hopeful and inspiring thing. Granted, there's a lot you can pick apart with Swift's actions, especially like her support of the LGBTQ plus community. I think is very strange. I do appreciate when she said, and I quote, like, oh, in the video, I want it to just be what's entirely me. Gay pride, that's me. And I was like, well, that's okay. That's a weird choice, Taylor, but love that for you, I guess. And then on the Eras tour to be silent. Yeah, right. I was like, yes. Odd things, especially with how that's aged with some of her comments, but like, you know what, valid. But I think overall, when you look at this documentary with age, seeing the Eras tour, seeing the success of all these albums, seeing her, really have the second wave of just like blowing up to be the biggest artist, that's an incredibly inspiring message. So I appreciate that. If she like lost because it ends kind of sad, because she loses the election that she was influencing, still that woman's still in office, like that's depressing. But I was like, oh, if she lost everything, this would have just been like a haunting look at like why you never speak your mind. But good that it didn't.
It's what you brought up about this being a second wave, and that's spot on. Where you look at, from the debut Taylor Swift album, the self-titled one, all the way to what I'd say about Reputation, it feels very scattershot. She's still trying to find a place in what her sound is. And I'm not saying she's found it yet, but I do think we are closer to realising what the Taylor Swift album is, with stuff like Folklore, with parts of Midnights. And now that she's doing the Taylor's version, I know they're just to, get it into her own hands. But you look at Red and the deep cuts, the stuff with Phoebe Bridgers, the stuff with Lana Del Rey, it's starting to all come together. It's starting to kind of like click in my brain, what's left of it, where it's like, it's starting to fire, and it's getting good. And it's Miss Americana, it does feel like a precursor. It's like the calm before the storm. And it's always nice when a Taylor Swift album releases, because I've reviewed a couple of Taylor Swift albums, but I've only published one. But it's always a pleasure to read a Taylor Swift review. And to be fair, Midnight's got fucking slated, and I don't think that's fair.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely not her worst album. It's actually quite good.
Yeah, I think the thing with Taylor Swift, at least my experience has been with pretty much every one of her albums, is that they take time to grow on you. I mean, even
Yeah,
like Evermore, Folklore, the first time I listened, I was like, oh, it's good. I don't know, like, if it's really like great. And then you listen to it and you're like over and over and you're like, oh, it's amazing. Same with Midnight. The first listen, I was very like, oh, what are we doing here, Taylor? Um, so I think that a lot of people, like the initial listen, for me at least, and I assume it's for others, don't necessarily do Taylor Swift well. Um,
yeah.
but I guess that's also just one of the things unique with like reviewing and criticism is like you always have to do your initial take, and it's like, well, art sometimes grows on people. So
Yeah, I think 90% of the initial takes I have are horribly wrong.
right.
I would still maintain Red is one of the best albums, though, mainly because it's got I Knew You Were Trouble on there, which is, if it weren't for Heartbreak Kid, it would be her best song.
Right. What's your favorite so you said your favorite album was either Reputation
Or
or no, sorry, it
Folklore.
was either Love or
Folklore, yeah,
Folklore.
yeah. I think I'd say Folklore. I think that just tips it because I absolutely love Betty as a song. Like
Yeah.
right towards the end of the album's lovely, and then it just nicely works into Peace and Hoax, top stuff. And Seven's a wonderful song as well. But I feel like Lover was, I mean, obviously Folklore, it kind of gets bashed about as like a lockdown project, you know what I mean? Where it was
Sure.
like, she did it at home, fair enough. It's very stripped back, very acoustic. Where the production of Lover is huge. It's massive. You've got celebrities all over the place, but you've also got Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince, which is probably her most fulfilled song creatively.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, that's the one there. And even then, stuff like, Me or Cornelia Street is just wonderful stuff. It's really,
Brilliant.
really incredibly written. And I
Yeah.
don't think Taylor Swift gets enough credit for obviously her writing or whether or not she uses a team or whatever. The lyrics are there and present and they don't feel commercially driven, which is a very rare thing to get for someone that tops the charts almost always, is that nice quality divide of this is a deeply personal track that she's actually put a lot of thought into and the production matches that, and this is an extremely popular song. You don't quite get that matchup anymore. It's usually one or the other these days, especially in the UK charts. So to see that consistently, even if it's kind of, oh, well, that's a bit half-baked or that could be better, it's just the fact that the effort is there. I appreciate that more from a megastar like Taylor Swift because it's very easy to slide back and just say, well, I know what people want now, I'll just do that over and over. But it does feel like Taylor Swift is always challenging. I think that's the takeaway from Miss Americana, really, is she's always trying to progress her image, not for the sake of brand appeal, but for the sake of keeping it interesting. Because you do get artists that they'll hit a successful vein, sap it up, and then that's it. They've got nothing else to show for it. And there are too many bands in the UK that are very popular that still do that. It's like when Arctic Monkeys get criticised for not doing the stuff they did in 2013 anymore. And then you look at the bands that have done the same stuff since 2013 and you wonder which ones are more successful. It's like the ones with the one-hit wonders are the ones who did The Car. It's terrible.
For sure. I think for me it would be between, I mean, I do love Folklore. I love the sound of that and Evermore. I really wish we got a third album with that like idea. For me it would either be Reputation or Lover. I think they're both spectacular albums. Outside of the Ed Sheeran track on Reputation, I think that's like damn near flawless. But Lover is so good. I mean, Lover is like undeniably good, I think. Like every single song pretty much on that. So it'd be one of those two for me. Do you have anything left you would like to say about Miss Americana before we wrap things up today?
No, other than that, I really appreciate the fact that Miss Americana is sort of a dying breed of what music journalism and documentary should be. There are very few like that. Selena Gomez had a documentary released last year, and it wasn't up to scratch for who she is as a person or an artist. The same goes for so many artists that are getting documentaries made about them now. And the issue is that they're a bit shy of being really honest and open with fans that will tear them apart regardless of what they say. So to see the earnestness and the openness from Taylor Swift in this was really quite touching. It's a messy documentary. You're absolutely correct with that, but it is an honest one at the very least. And it's hard to come by those, especially for people that are that big and have that much brand and money to protect.
Yeah. And also life is messy, if you're going to capture the honesty of life and honesty, that's how it is. So you can go ahead and stream Miss Americana on Netflix, and stream Taylor's music, Taylor's version, ideally, wherever you can. Ewan, for our question of the week today, I'm going to ask you what Taylor Swift song, because she is starting to dive into the realm of cinema. We had the All Too Well 10-minute version, short film that everyone lied was going to be nominated for an Oscar, and it wasn't. Weird, everyone. Almost like they were doing that almost like they were saying that for clicks.
No.
What Taylor Swift song would you like to see turn into a narrative feature adapted? What should Taylor turn to?
I'll tell you what. I think if we're adapting her songs, you got to go back to the old ones, the really old ones. Because I think the thing about Speak Now, the Taylor's version, is essentially she's looking at her old work through a new perspective now, and you don't get the chance to do that with many artists. And I really appreciate that, it's for contractual reasons or whatever she's trying to do to reclaim the songs. But there is a chance for reflection, which most musicians try and shy away from, but Taylor Swift has been forced into this recollection of her old songs and demos, which has been a wonderful experience, and people are revisiting these and thinking, oh, these actually sound better than I remember. If you could take Speak Now, maybe, Enchanted, well, Enchanted's already a film, isn't it? That's also already a film, isn't it? Take Haunted, Mansion, never mind.
That's what it's based on, actually.
Tell you what, we'll take a different album entirely. I actually think it's like, I hate to say it because it's one of the more typical tracks for Taylor Swift, one of the more stereotypes of, why do you listen to Taylor Swift? This is all she does. But I Knew You Were Trouble, I think would make an excellent movie. I think if you took that in the right swing of things, just a proper anti-rom-com, but without the comedy,
Yeah.
A bit like, when it's not a happy ending, when they realise they're better off alone rather than together. Something like that. Yeah. Which is why I watch daily.
Kind of in the same vein, I think that I'm going to go with 'Tis the Damn Season. I almost went Welcome to New York, not because of a narrative, but just like I think the vibe of that song is so powerful. And I think back to when Secret Life of Pets, shout out, opens to that song with like this gorgeous animation, weirdly gorgeous animation of New York City. And every time I'm just like pumped. I'm like, that's cinema. But I think 'Tis the Damn Season has a lot to offer narratively. I think if you get the right person behind that and just this idea of like having someone... I think it would just work well. But shout out Secret Life of Pets. Not a great film, but great opening and weirdly great animation. Except the ride at Universal sucks. I'll say that. Sorry, everyone.
Yeah. I remember watching that when I had food poisoning. It doesn't make sense sober either.
Maybe one day we'll cover it on Clapper. Let us know. Email us if you really want our Secret Life of Pets double feature episode. With that, let's go to our rapid reviews. This is just our time to talk about literally anything you've seen, old or new, good or bad, just something to mention. Ewan, what do you have for your rapid review this week?
I tell you what, I've got Asteroid City now. I only say that because it's one of the 3 films I've seen this month. Big Wes Anderson fan, really love Asteroid City. A little better than The French Dispatch, a little worse than most of the other films he's done, but the soundtrack is it's beautiful. You've got Jarvis Cocker and Richard Hawley tearing it up on there. You've got a nice little cameo from one of them. It is a wonderful film. It feels like Wes Anderson's back at like that sort of... He's pivoted away from chessboard revolutions with Timothée Chalamet helming them to Aren't Aliens Funny and Strange, which is nice because that suits him a bit better. The lighter stuff really pops for him. And it was just a fun watch. I had a really nice time watching that. And then obviously I did Barbie and Oppenheimer, while I was deathly ill. In the same day. I love it. I ate half a chicken between the screenings of both films, and then I fell asleep for the first 20 minutes of Oppenheimer because I was violently sick. I was feeling grim. The peri-peri sauce at Nando's did not help. But I powered through, saw the creation of the atom bomb, and I'm better for it. It's an alright movie, it's fine. People were going mad about it at the screen, like, oh my god, it's amazing. It's like, but it's not Memento, is it? It's not Inception. Well, actually, it's like on par with Inception. It's alright, it's like a 7 out of 10. And Barbie was fun. Barbie was just good fun. I went on a date to see that, and they turned to me and said, "You're such an Alan," and I don't really know how to take that, but I've taken it.
That's the craziest thing to say to someone on a date.
They just leaned over and were like, "You're such an Alan." It's like, the fuck? I'll take a comparison to Michael Cera. I just love that Barbie as well has released and made all this money, and Mattel have gone, "Oh no, we're not making these characters again." They're like, "Oh, but there's a high demand, you can make a lot of money." It's like, no, fuck off. Alan is retired, and that's that. He's staying that way. We're not bringing him back. Such an Alan
We're not bringing back a gay doll. Hell no. Instead, we're going to make 14 more films, including our Uno movie, to make a cinematic universe.
We need Play-Doh the movie. I can't watch that. I'm allergic to Play-Doh.
What a bummer. I don't think I've ever played with Play-Doh. I don't think I ever did the... I don't... You eat... Well, yeah.
No, not eat it. I mean, like, just... I don't eat Play-Doh anymore. I mean, at all. But...
You quit that back in 2015.
When was the last time I ate Play-Doh? Maybe about 4 months ago.
Wow, good job.
It's not like Play-Doh. It fucking stinks.
4 months sober.
4 months Play-Doh free.
For me, I've been revisiting Neil Blomkamp. He has a new film coming out, and we're doing our District 9 Patreon recording for this month. Yes. Dates are hard. So I'll just say, I finally watched Demonic, which is the film no one knows he made in 2021, I believe.
Oh, shit, yeah.
It's awful. Has the production quality genuinely of a Hallmark film, yet the plot of Serenity, the one where the guy is in the video game, it turns out, just terrible. Like, genuinely just embarrassing. Though I also rewatched Chappie last night, didn't like it. Holding on hope. I've never seen District 9, so I'm hoping I like it. But this director is so far not doing great for me. But we'll see. With that, that's going to do this episode of ClapperCast. Ewan, where can we find you on social media?
Oh, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Letterboxd at Ewan Gleadow, EWANGLEADOW. I also, what else do I do these days? Don't really do much.
What's Twitter? Oh, you mean X?
Oh, sorry, X. My apologies, Mr. Musk. Dear me. Yeah, you can find me on x.com at Ewan Gleadow at EWANGLEADOWX. And Instagram
do not accidentally type in X videos and look up Ewan Gleadow. Do not do that. No.
Do not do that. Don't do that. Very bad. Don't do that. We all got to make rent somehow, but don't do that. I promise nothing will come up. But Twitter... X,
but don't look, just in case.
Don't look.
Great. Yeah, you should check out Ewan. You can find me on X or Twitter at BP_movie reviews, Letterboxd Carson Tamar. Email us, clappercast@gmail.com. I don't know, watch our stuff. If you're watching this, you're watching us already, so I don't know why I tell you every episode to watch us, but thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye.